Hey, howdy, hi, how's it going? My name is Mason. Mason Allen is the name on the cover of my books. And you are once again watching the writer's block. Or, just listening to it while you have another tab open. I don't know how you live your life, and I'm not here to judge you for it. Tonight, we are going to be talking about self-publishing and book releases. I just recently went through my second self-published book release. Woot woot, all the party sounds. And so we're going to be talking about that. The group has some questions. I have some thoughts. So yeah, shall we begin? Does anyone have a question for me?
So what was different about releasing your second book compared to your first book in the series?
That is an excellent question. I had more goals for my second book's release than I did for the first book's release. Honestly, by the time that the first book's release arrived, I just so desperately wanted to get it out into the world that if I had released it to an empty room, I would have done so, right? I remember distinctly going to the first book's book signing. And when I got there and the time came for the book signing to begin, no one was in the room. And I thought to myself, okay, this is what the release is going to be like. And then a decent number of people ended up coming, and it was a great experience. But yeah, so second book, I had a lot more goals. I was a lot more pushy. I got a good 150 pre-orders. First book did not get nearly that many. So yeah, second book I would say was a much more kind of focused effort as far as the actual release was concerned on my end. Whereas the first book, I just wanted a book out there in the universe.
So tell us a little bit more about pre-orders and what that can do for a book's visibility when it comes out.
Excellent question. So I can really only speak to this as far as Kindle Direct Publishing is concerned, because I have not worked with other self-publishing platforms to this point. But with Kindle Direct Publishing, all pre-orders count as having been ordered on the day of release, right? Which can make it so that your book's opening day can have a really big surge of sales. Which, if that surge of sales is big enough, can then incentivize Amazon's algorithm into promoting that particular book to audiences that it may not otherwise reach. I will say that it's harder to do than I had even realized this second time going through. I had misunderstood some facts and figures about the categories and keywords that my book was a part of. And so I thought that my release day with 150 book orders was going to do better as far as the algorithm was concerned than it ended up doing. But I'm still very happy about the fact that I set a goal and reached it. So yeah, that's kind of what pre-orders do for you. A sad thing about KDP at this point that I've noticed is that pre-ordering paperbacks is not possible, right? So the only method for pre-ordering is ebooks, which, depending on your audience, can actually be a deterrent to pre-orders happening, right? I had to convince a lot of people to just buy the ebook, even though they knew that they weren't going to read it and were going to end up buying the paperback. So, yeah.
You mentioned something about a book signing for your first book. I know you have one for your second book at a bookstore nearby. How do you set that up?
Excellent question. This particular bookstore, which is, oh my goodness, Weller Bookworks in Trolley Square here in Salt Lake City, has kind of an event coordinator. And so basically I just kind of had to, with the first book, I actually didn't even set up the book signing. Family friends did it for me as kind of like a book release gift, a kind of token of support, which was really, really kind of that particular family member. and a gesture that I really appreciated, which also made it so that getting the second one set up was a lot easier. But basically, I just kind of had to find the event coordinator with this particular bookstore and get that arranged. In my experience, getting that set up really varies from bookstore to bookstore. If you can find a local bookstore that is like very kind of event oriented and very like kind of involved with the community and has a lot of things happening, that bookstore will probably be easier to get into because they will kind of have a little bit more of a structure for such a thing. But also at the same time, you run the risk of having to do the book signing way later than you would like because they are also busy. But like getting into a book signing at Barnes and Noble, for example, that's not going to happen for me at this point. And a bunch of other bookstores that I wanted to do signings at declined and said, like, we're just used bookstores. We don't really do new books, so we're not going to do this. So yeah, it's kind of a weird experience seeing how thoroughly diverse and divided bookstores are in general, as far as events are concerned.
I'm curious about your series. As someone who loves epic stories and would like to tell them, but also has the attentional span of a goldfish, do you know how many books will be in this series, and how have you gone about planning that?
That is an excellent question. So this series was originally going to be a trilogy. That was my plan. Even as the five of us began our class with Brandon Sanderson all those years ago. But then during that particular class, I had realized around that point that the book was too long. I was working on the first book. It was 750 pages and I was only 3/4 of the way through the story. And for a first science fiction novel, particularly with traditional publishing, I just thought to myself, this is way too long. But I still wanted all the characters and I still wanted a lot of those story beats. And then Brandon talked about self-publishing and how a lot of self-published authors will publish shorter books, but more of them, right? And thereby create kind of these really long series that also aren't very intimidating to the reader. And so I ended up deciding to take these 3 novels and basically make them into kind of volumes within the series, right? So when you look at the book cover, it says Book X, Volume X, right? The Departure says Book 1, Volume 1. Prison Break says Book 2, Volume 1. I should have asked the cover designer to rearrange those so it would be like Volume 1, Book 2, but I didn't, so here we are. So the long and the short is we are currently 2 books into what will probably be 4 or 5 books in the first volume. And that is just one of the 3, right? So I really just decided to hoist myself into writing books with maybe the longest series I could have signed on for, because that's a very practical move when you're publishing. It was a very undoubtedly wise decision on my part.
I mean, I think they're good books, so I think it's a wise decision, but that's just me. So.
Thank you, Mari. Thank you.
I would certainly rather have them than not have them, that's for sure.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
So Mason, what would you say is your favorite part about this book? What can readers look forward to when they go to read it?
Oh man, what a good question. What a good question. I think that this book is a lot more about the characters than the first book was. The first book was kind of about the events and kind of about the world, I think, and kind of about getting a runway set up that the rest of the series could kind of take off of. This book, I think, is a lot more about the characters and the struggles and emotions that they are all grappling with. And I think that's a really good thing. And I think that a lot of the characters really hit home. And out of our various conversations that we have had along with the others, I think you guys would probably agree with that.
wholeheartedly, for sure. There's just, I hate to say heart again, but it's so true. There's just so much heart in this last book. It's, as was said, very glad that it's out there as opposed to not. Really fun read.
We're going to throw a link down in the description, right? Because everybody should read this book. It's very good.
Absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely.
you guys. Thank
Yeah.
you guys. I think it's a pretty great book. So yeah.
Any closing thoughts for us, Mason?
Yeah, I guess if you like very human, superpowered individuals struggling with ethics and difficulties and mental health in a post-apocalyptic dystopian world, please read my books. If you don't, that's okay too. Maybe you should read my books anyway, because they're still pretty decent. Whatever the case, thanks so much for joining us for this particular instance of the Writer's Block. We will talk to you later, blockheads.